My name is Brenda Shantz. I am a member of the Levy Committee. The Levy Committee is made up of the people that you see up here, so I am going to let them introduce themselves, starting.
Hoover.
Brian Pendleton.
No, he's not exactly, but we'll get to him.
Allie Knoll.
Dustin Myers.
Melissa Rummel.
And Tracy Hauk was offering you papers when you walked in. We want to first start off by thanking the Lake Seneca Association and Brandy for allowing us to use the building tonight to invite you to come out, and of course thank you guys for coming out, and hopefully we can answer the questions that you have. We don't have a really long presentation, but hopefully we have enough details that you're going to walk away feeling like it was worth your time tonight. The papers that Tracy was handing out when you walked in are basically almost exactly what's on the screen. So I know when I go and sit and listen to something, sometimes I'm writing down a bunch of numbers and then I'm missing what people are saying, so we thought if we at least printed them for you that you could follow along and ask questions that way. Before I do start, I do want to introduce, this is our new school finance officer, Ryan, and he will be speaking when I'm done, and he is going to be the one to answer your specific financial questions, because that is definitely not on me. So we just all volunteered because we think that it's super important that we get this levy passed because we have kids in this school. A lot of us have young kids in this school, and we really want to see our community and our school thrive. For our kids' sake, for your kids' sake, for your grandkids' sake. A strong school is a strong community. A strong community is a strong school, and we just really feel strongly about that. That's why we have been meeting once a week for a couple hours a night on our own time, even though we all have kids in sports and we all have jobs and that kind of stuff, to bring this stuff together. So I will go ahead and get started. So the first most important thing is, what are we actually asking for? We are simply asking for a 1% earned income tax for 5 years. So this vote is in November, unless you vote early, and it would be 1% earned 5 years. So go ahead. And as a school, where do we even get our money? Well, some of it comes from the state, some of it comes from local. As of right now, for North Central, it's property taxes. And then some of it comes from federal, but the majority of our federal money is grant money that is earmarked for very specific things. And the lovely school finance people are the ones who get to make sure that we're using it on exactly what we are supposed to use it on. And the auditor said last year and the year before that we're doing exactly that. Go ahead. All right, so an earned income tax. This is a local tax source, right? So it is from the people who live in the North Central School District. If you work in the North Central School District, are you going to pay it? But don't live in the North Central School District?
Yes.
No. Live.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, if you work here but don't live here.
Correct.
Right, so it is only for the people who live in the North Central School District, sorry. So that's the resident only. If you do not live in the North Central School District, this would not affect you. And then it is funds that go directly to North Central local schools. It doesn't go 20 other places and then trickle back to us. So it's for educational needs and operations to make us the best that we can be. So what actually is taxed? Wages and salaries based on your W-2. Tips and commissions, self-employment income, okay? So if you don't have any of those, more than likely you aren't gonna be asked to pay anything, okay? So saying yes gets the school more money but doesn't actually individually cost you anything, because retirement benefits are tax exempt, Social Security payments are tax exempt, investment income, dividends, unemployment compensation, those things are all tax exempt. If you have any specific questions on your individual situation, we'll try to hold those until the end. So if you get a normal paycheck and you've got your wages and your salary and you get your W-2, more than likely your employer is just gonna start taking it out of your paycheck. Now some employers, I know for instance my husband works in Hillsdale, Michigan, they don't take any local taxes out. So we live in town, he has to pay his town income tax either quarterly or annually, whichever he chooses, and he would do the same thing for this, because his employer's not gonna take the money out for him. But most of our employers, if they take Pioneer tax out or some other taxes out for you, your employer will probably do so. If your employer does not do so, you can do quarterly payments. Self-employed individuals, you probably already are doing quarterly payments for state taxes or other kinds of things. And then again, all the payments flow through the state. So we are the only school in Williams County that does not have an earned income tax. We're the only school that relies, as far as local income, solely on property taxes. So this is just a layout of the other schools and the other public schools in Williams County. And the biggest difference that you'll see if you look up here, some of these are traditional and some of these are earned. So they've been around for a while. Stryker was the first one. They got theirs back in 1991. So they've been getting 1.5% income tax since 1991, and that's a traditional income tax. So that means things like retirement and pensions and dividends and investment income. They get taxed on all of that in Stryker. So since 1991, Stryker residents, Stryker local school residents, have been paying 1.5% on all of their income. Again, we're asking for a 1%. All of the other ones, the most recent, Eden at 2016. So they're going on almost 10 years of having that tax. So the lowest is 1%, as you can see, which is also what we're asking for. The highest is 1.5%. There's a combination of traditional and earned. Go ahead. So the reason that we have this numbers, don't get too caught up in like the dollars and the cents, like exactly, but schools' property taxes, based on property taxes, we at North Central are getting $144,979 per mill. I know mills might not be anything we understand, and to be quite honest, even after lots of learning, I don't 100% understand it either, but I can compare dollars to dollars, and yes, we are getting the most here, right? But we are the only one without the 0% income tax. So when you come over here, these schools are flying past us. Forecasted revenue from income taxes, $1.5 million. Do you have any idea what North Central's annual budget is? How much we spend a year? I was at the board meeting last night and it's approximately $10 million. Can you imagine if we could increase our budget by 15%, what we could do in our district that we can't do today? So all of these schools are getting a minimum of $730,000 more than us. Where over here, we're getting a maximum of $50,000 more than them. So this is where the big gap is, because we have that 0%. Okay? So why now? It's been 20 years since we've requested a levy. I'll be honest, I didn't even live here 20 years ago. It's been 20 years since North Central has requested an operating tax levy, and I believe that was just like a continuation of one that we already had before that. We all know our paychecks are hurting, right? Inflation continues to widen the gap. I go to the grocery store and get the same order that I got 2 years ago, and it costs almost twice as much, it feels like. Well, it's the same, I mean, in education, everything is going up, just like in your everyday life. So inflation continues to widen the gap between the money that's coming in and the money that has to go out in order to educate our children. So our state funding also, unfortunately, continues to decrease. If you try to pay attention to what's going on with state funding and education, oh my goodness, it's a mess. And everything they want to do is give us less and less and less and make the local go more and more and more. So without this levy, just some other things that we may face: larger class sizes due to staffing cuts. So I'm actually a teacher. I teach at Wauseon, just because that's where I was teaching before I moved to here. And I can tell you that every extra person that gets added to my class makes my job not only harder, but it makes what the students are getting sitting there, it makes it go down a level, because I've got one more kid and one more kid and one more kid to try to meet. And so increasing staff or decreasing staff and increasing class sizes, it's so big, especially in the elementary, especially with those littles who need that one-on-one. And so many parents today aren't home, right? How many parents have a parent at home all day who's helping them with learning, and so they're going into kindergarten well prepared? I hear from more and more kindergarten teachers, not necessarily in North Central, but about kindergartners coming in not even knowing like their full name. So we don't have parents at home who can do that. So having those small class sizes is huge for the progress of our kids. Reduced funding for extracurriculars. Extracurriculars, is not just sports. People want to get caught up in, well, we're spending this on athletics and this and that. What about our band? What about our quiz team? What about any other art programs that we have? I'll be honest, my kids are little, so I don't even know what some of the clubs are that we have in the high school, but I know we have a gaming club. They just started a chess club that I learned about that at the board meeting last night. So all of those other things, those are extracurriculars, it's not just sports. Delays in technology and facility upgrades. Our school is pieced together. We really have almost 3 separate schools, and a lot of the technology shows it, because if I want to make an announcement, I can't make an announcement and it be heard on the whole campus. It's going to be heard here, and then someone else has to do one to be heard here, and someone else has to do one to be heard here. Well, I don't know about you, but with the craziness that the world is today, I would really like those to all be connected. And that's something right now we haven't done because we couldn't afford it. So delays in technology, facility upgrades, there is so much more. We're not going to do 8 million things tonight, but that's just a little piece of the pie. So this is an operating expenditure, an operating levy, so things can only be used on operating expenses. So, and these are on your paper, but just some things: transportation costs, classroom materials and technology, teacher and staff salaries, building maintenance and safety, and then just utilities and general school operations. Things we need to do to keep the school open, keep it running efficiently. So this is on there, and I questioned whether or not to keep it. But one of the last things was teacher salaries. And as a teacher, I know that quite often we hear, right after COVID, we heard, oh, you don't make enough. Get those teachers paid. But now, people have forgotten that part, and the teachers, you make too much. People go and they look up our salaries and they say, you make too much. Well, this is the teacher starting salary in Williams County for every teacher. If a teacher comes to us straight out of college, with a degree, which they have to have, and 0 years of experience. As you can see, that teacher is going to earn $39,571 gross. Can I tell you something that I actually have never even brought it to these guys because I just thought about it? Did you know that teachers automatically get 14% of their pay taken by the teacher state retirement system? Is that great for when we retire? Sure is. Is that great when you're a first-year teacher and aren't making all that much and 14% is taken out before you touch a dime? It makes it very difficult. So take all these salaries and reduce them by 14% before you take out any federal taxes, any state taxes, any local taxes, etc. So 39, we're in the ballpark. You get over here, Brian's at 45. You know what? They might be a bigger district, but they're teaching the same size of classrooms. No classrooms can have over a certain number, so we're teaching the same numbers of kids. And you can see we're one of only 2 schools under 40,000. So go back, can you go back one slide for me real quick? So down here where it says teacher and staff salaries, if we could get that starting pay up just a little bit higher, I think we would have a much better chance at recruiting high quality teachers to not only come, because we can get them to come, but we got to get them to stay. All right. I want to say that is my last slide. Whew. Does anybody have any questions for me before Ryan takes over?
Are you required to be in the teachers union
At North Central?
anywhere?
At Wasion, I am not required to be in the teachers union. It is a choice.
So you have the choice of the 14%.
That is not union, it's retirement, the state retirement. So when I started teaching, you did not have a choice. The teachers today actually do have a choice. If you speak to a financial person, they will say the better choice is to do that. But teachers today do have a second option when they start. When I started 23 years ago, there was no option. They also only took like 5% back then. Inflation, I love it. Thank you. Any other questions for me before Ryan takes over? All right, thank you.
Okay. I'll give you a little bit of background on me. I play a different role in a school district. As a finance officer in a school district in Ohio, I cannot advocate for speak against for a school levy. So I have to be considered an independent source. And that goes for the superintendent as well. So my job is to safekeep the district assets, make sure they're well presented to state auditor's office, to taxpayers like you, help the state, help the local budget commissions, identify how we collect taxes. So maybe let me start off with a little history of school funding in Ohio. There's 609 districts in Ohio. So that ranges from every aspect, from the largest of schools, Columbus City Schools has got 50,000 kids, to one of the island school districts has 5. Every single school district in Ohio has a levy or a tax schedule. It can go as short as, there's a school district that goes on the ballot about every 3 years. And there's districts like yours that go 20 years or longer. The districts that go 20 years or longer tend to be smaller enrollment, residential base, usually ag value, so less homes, so less building. And so one of the charts up there was what 1 mil equals, and a mil is 1/10 of a penny. So it's just a fraction that you apply to property values. And that 1 mil is 144,000. So you can imagine how many mills it takes to get to an equivalent of what the income tax is. So my job is to validate the numbers. So the first thing that we did as the new fiscal officer is to validate numbers. So we looked over the handouts, we looked over the school district finances, looked over the history of times between the last ask, and I can tell you that those are presented reasonably. They're not overstated, the financial books look good, the audits are clean and well presented. We passed the budget last night, and thanks for calling out also that the school district's budget is a $10 million budget. So most likely it's the largest or one of the largest employers and largest budgets in the community and in all of your communities. Let's see what kind of slides. There's some factual information. I think the one thing that we didn't address in the earlier slides is the annual revenue is just under $1 million in annual revenue. It's about $900,000. Next slide. We've covered what it funds. So I work in a lot of districts around Ohio, and this is almost always a question that's asked during levy and ballot time, is what have you done to make sure that you're efficient in your spend? Have you tightened your belt to the extent at all possible before you have any ask? And working with your superintendent, Mike, Mike pores over the numbers more than most superintendents I've ever worked with. I've been doing this for about 25 years, worked with a lot of superintendents. He's very involved in the finances. First time I had met Mike, he sat me in his office and he had about 20 slides of financial indicators that he had drawn up. And he's like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? So I was really pleased to see his activity in the finances. So he's already listed these in with the board's support about as efficient as we can with busing, right? So that's a major expense. Buses, by the way, now are well over $100,000. We just priced one for a district of $130,000. Parapro or support, so outside of the direct teacher, we sometimes bring in additional supports. So sometimes school districts hire a parapro or a tutor. It's easier just to keep them and then hire another parapro or tutor in another classroom in another. Mike and the board have said, okay, the use for this parapro tutor is done. Let's now move them on so we're not like overextending additional staff. Substitutes, the need for substitutes in Ohio exploded after the pandemic all over the place. And so what Mike's pledged here is we're managing that footprint. as well as we can. We don't have extra substitutes running, and that's sometimes almost expensive as a first-year teacher, depending on how many days they spend in district. One custodial maintenance position was reduced and 2 intervention specialists. Our first pay coming up in our forecast, we should be able to see those savings into the books, and those were approved with the budget last night. Next slide. On your handout, and I believe in other materials you passed out, you've got a schedule of annual income, what the 1% earned means to folks per month, per week, and per day. So that schedule's out there. And I don't know if you have an electronic calculator.
We did not actually end up including that because we wanted to be careful we didn't do any wrong numbers, so we did not actually include that on your papers.
Got it.
So,
Okay. So we might be able to post, or work with you about posting maybe a calculator
okay,
for folks to go out and be a reference leading up to the election. You're like, here's my income, here's what I want to see it's gonna cost.
that'd be great.
What we need to validate for that is the Department of Taxation gross income schedules, and we can do that. We have access to those. So that gives you a little bit of feedback about what it might cost you.
Well, it's on the
So let's talk a little bit, we're gonna get into a little bit of property taxes. As I talk around the state of Ohio, let's go to the next slide, because we're gonna get to, oh, you brought this over to Google, it's a little messy. Let's go to the next slide. All right, here's how schools are funded. And this is what gets people charged up a little bit, because schools come for asks. And asks are tax increases, right? So that's what gets people charged up a little bit. So let me give you, you make the determination of what that tax increase, not me, right? I'm giving you facts and figures, your committee's giving you facts and figures. But schools are funded between a responsibility between the state and between locals. That's in law. It's in Ohio's Constitution. It's been in the Ohio Constitution for a long time, and thank God that they did, right? Because it is a priority for the state of Ohio to have that shared responsibility. I work on school funding a lot in Columbus with all of our lawmakers. There's a commitment, no matter what party they are in Columbus, that they want to fund schools. The argument on how to fund schools is a very real debate all the time. Every school district gets a base cost. So every student all over Ohio, we've got about 1.5 million kiddos in Ohio, has an allocation applied to them. The part in the middle, the state local share, that's the tough part. That's the complicated part. It takes every school district in Ohio and it ranks you from the most wealthy in Ohio to the poorest. Poorest is an income. Poorest and wealthiest is the amount of property value you have divided by the number of kids. Okay, so let that sink in there a little bit, because that's probably the one of the most misunderstood things about school funding in Ohio. The amount of property you have is the determinant of how wealthy you are, divided by the number of kids. So you have very, very large urbans which have median incomes that are $27,000, which are considered wealthy in Ohio because they have so much property. Commercial, industrial, and residential, there's so much property. And you have small communities like yours who are considered wealthier because you have 500-ish kiddos. What was the count? 534?
Correct.
534 last night, divided by all of the residents' property, ag value, and the little bit of commercial industrial that you have.
Can we point out too that North Central is the largest district in our county, like 77 square miles, where others are like 49?
Yeah,
So,
that's a great point. So 77 square miles is a pretty sizable footprint.
I think Bryan was like 49.
49?
Yeah, Bryan's a pretty big big school.
Yeah, a little denser.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a huge difference for transportation footprint, and if a lot of this is ag value, which it is, you know, that can symbolize to the state of Ohio, you've got ag value in the homes with few kids, the state treats you a little bit wealthier. It's not to say that that equation's right. And then categoricals means all the extras. So if we have special education or gifted in transportation or technology, those are all add-ons to the state. Let's go to the next slide. I do have another slide in there, but I received a question, and I think what many of you want to know is reappraisal in Ohio. Why did my tax bill go up? How does this work? How does this apply? Is it sufficient enough? So there is a piece of legislation passed in the 1970s. It was called House Bill 920. And why that matters is today we're in a very similar situation than we were in the 1970s. Property values were dramatically increasing during the 1970s. So our lawmakers in Ohio passed a piece of legislation to limit the growth on property taxes. And that forever set in motion in Ohio that we've passed 11,000 school levies since that time in Ohio. The important point is schools by law have to come to their voting public. So it's both a transparency effort and sometimes it's a fatiguing effort, right? To come and make that ask. But we have to by law because our revenues don't grow. So why an income tax? And that should give you an idea of why communities, especially in your county, have moved away from property values. And many of you and our commissioners saw massive increase in property values. So you're seeing a shift in Ohio away from property tax values and more towards an income tax. And I think the premise there is it's a more fair and equitable tax that's applied. It's applied uniformly when incomes go up. There's a relative growth in that tax. When incomes go down, there's a decline in that. Whereas the property tax levy, once set, it's set this way forever. So someday in the future, you have to come back and make up that inflation. Stay on track with teacher salaries. And I do think that schools do a relatively poor job of telling the story. We're a service-oriented industry. Our primary job is to employ staff in the structure to teach kiddos. That's our job. We shouldn't hide it. We should say that there's budgetary increases. When I started, a bus was $45,000. It's $130 now. So having that income tax is, I would add, in my opinion, try not to editorialize here because I'm not supposed to, it is a more fair and equitable tax compared to a property that only raises about $140,000 for a mill. So how many mills are we going to have to raise? It's a pretty substantial millage to offset that. I have a slide in there if anybody wants to get into 20 mil floor, and you probably have heard that. I would leave you with, I think that the state of Ohio is going to consider some additional tax reform. It's going to be on property taxes. So in that regard, I do commend the school board and community for kind of looking away from the property tax, because I do think the state's going to enact some legislation. All right, so I'll pause there, see what questions, and to the extent we can give the levy committee some more tools, or maybe a calculator that we can put online. We can definitely link the county auditor's website with property values. We can do those kind of things. So
I do have the handout. This is on North Central's website, and it does have the calculation.
Oh, great.
Submitted.
Is that the facts and figures?
Correct.
Yes.
Perfect.
So I'll hand that out to everybody.
we messed that up.
You gotta be clear when you're getting papers out,
Come on,
right?
Dustin.
It's been a while.
That's all right. Two more.
You guys, okay.
Just take two more.
You need that one.
Did you guys ever get?
Yep.
Both. Okay.
The circle's the same in the front center, but the info is different.
Back rows there.
And that's right on our school website, so you got a handout in paper, but if you ever refer anybody else, or you wanna look, it's on the school website.
Ryan, I heard from a school board member that it's a fact that within the next, like every year, it's gonna go down a percentage of how much the state is giving our school. Is that true, or can you talk about that at all?
The question was about state funding. This year, so we just entered the new biennium budget. So the state passes a budget every 2 years. And this year was the smallest increase since 2008. So the great economic recession, which was global, property values actually declined during that time. And I would tell you from the debates that happened in Columbus, I don't anticipate that we're gonna see significant increases in school funding from the state's lens. I don't wanna turn this into an anti-state kind of declaration, but there needs to be a better understanding from Columbus about how to fund schools. There really does need to be that. They've funded some other choice options, which equal just about $1 billion over the last 2 years, that they could have maintained the school funding phase-in, the new formula, recognized enrollment better in districts, recognized property values better. So yes, so the budget does not include any increases coming from the state. Historically, we had seen some growth.
Kind of along those same lines, I recently saw a Facebook post, I think it's from a neighboring school superintendent, saying that there's a shift in tax burden going away from business and to residents and ag.
Yes.
Over like the last 30 years or.
Yeah. In the 1970s, if you took all property taxes, about 50% of the property taxes came from residents and 50% of the property taxes came from commercial industrial. It is now 70-30 residents. And what that means to me, and I had a chance to talk to some of those folks in Columbus and interact with them, is they've created a very aggressive tax cut policy to attract businesses to Ohio. Unfortunately, that has come at the expense of shifting the burden onto locals, especially with property tax. Another reason not to maybe look at a property tax, to look at something a little bit more broad-based.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
At this time, we're just kind of open for questions.
Yep.
So like I said, if it's financial based, he's probably gonna be more well-equipped to answer, but we're here to answer whatever questions you might have tonight.
How much shift is going to charter schools and per person, per pupil? I mean, is that coming down the pike? Is that where we're heading?
Vouchers.
So that's what,
Yeah,
the-
so much, you pick where you wanna go?
I mean, that's the $1 billion he's talking about, is that, like, we don't have a lot of options around here. If you wanna send your kid to a charter or a private and you live in the North Central School District, there's a couple options, but you don't have a ton of options. So personally, that's why I think not a lot of people have even like heard about what's happening. Where in the bigger cities where they have a lot more options, people are well aware that you can literally be paid money to send your kid to a private or a charter school.
Yep. Yep, we had the $1 billion back. Those went to choice options.
So, right now, my kids can take advantage of this charter option. I can get so much money for my kids to go to a private school.
But that money pays their tuition, correct?
That pays tuition. There's an amount for elementary and there's there's an amount for secondary, and
Does that vary from where you live, Columbus compared to Northwest Ohio? And
the amount doesn't. Who can qualify, there's a couple different qualifiers for performance of the district and income of the residents. Now, the income thresholds, most people, no matter what income, would qualify for that.
They're quite low.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can figure out like what you're getting at, I guess, like what's behind the question? Are you asking like how much, if we have a student who chooses to take advantage of that, what the district is losing per pupil because they're taking advantage of that?
my question is just, how does it work if there is, say, let's say it's $5,000 a pupil. 5,000 comes to me, I can either say I'm gonna take them to North Central and give that money to North Central, or I can say I'm gonna go to St. Pat's and give it to them. You know, I don't know
They
what
wouldn't
that
get the 5,000
amount
for
is, but,
Central,
you know, I'm
right?
just using that as a hypothetical.
Yeah.
How-
So you would never get the offer to use it at North Central because we're a public school, so we don't get any of that, and that's kind of the whole point. If you were to accept that 5,000, you would be using it towards tuition at any school that you're paying to go to.
I understand that, but is that where they're looking to head with that
Oh.
charter school? I mean, I understand it's relatively not, and it is relatively new and not relatively new.
Yeah, no, I think there is an effort out of Columbus to expand choice options. That is away from public schools. I mean, it's a fact, right? The statistics support that. You're a high-performing public school. Many of your colleagues around the county are high-performing public schools. So the choice options are not as dense here as there are in other places. The concern I would have, if I'm paying taxes here, is if the state's taking $1 billion and the 609 districts that make up 90% of the educated students in Ohio, so the 10% of the students got $1 billion increase in funding, then 90% of the students got about 150 million over the same time frame. That is definitely a policy decision out of Columbus to expand choice. There's a whole lot to unpack with that, but
Sure.
as you become well-informed, I would definitely ask my elected officials about that. It's a great question.
If you happen to catch what the Fulton County superintendents put out recently,
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. That's what they're, like, a publicly noticed, for lack of another term, and then they were on the news the other day with a press conference, answering questions about that, because they want to talk to our state officials and explain what this is doing to small local communities. So if you've seen anything of that out there, those are the things that's talking about.
So what would happen if we consolidated with West Unity and Montpelier, or whatever and however? I mean, specifically on my taxes.
Yeah. So the questions around school consolidation. There seems to be some discussion out of Columbus about consolidating school districts. In fact, I think it was Commissioner Galloway in Lake County who said we could take 600 school districts down to 94. I serve multiple school districts. I was at the committee hearing when he said 94, and I have a meeting with the commissioner Friday. So I'd like to.
Was it a county?
So the question is a real one. It's about, a little bit, this is more of a national perspective. Sometimes we're told that government's inefficient, right? And there seems to be a lot of rhetoric right now that government's inefficient. Ohio had 2,500 school districts 150 years ago. 2,500. We're at 609 now. Could we consolidate some school districts in Ohio? Yes, but it is not that easy. And so could you share a treasurer? Because I'm a shared treasurer. How much is that going to save between two school districts? And can one treasurer serve two school districts? I don't think that's where the real money is. That can happen. I serve multiple districts. But I serve multiple districts that tend to be smaller, less than 1,000 kids, who are trying to make the right fiscal decisions, right? Can one district share can two districts share one superintendent? Sure. Would they have to have an instructional specialist at the other campus? So you might save 15 or 20% on a superintendent's salary. Can two districts share 150 square miles of transportation routing? Now, when you have the square mileage like your county does, could you save some administrative expense? Maybe, but you give up some local control. That local control, I know, means something from all the communities that I work with. I don't know that there's significant savings. Are there districts in population dense areas that have 500 kids that can combine with a neighboring district and save 7 figures? Maybe that, but it's not even dozens in Ohio. So I've seen that there's an article that just got released today called the Ohio Education Policy Institute. It's a think tank. They released a bunch of data, and I'll make sure that you guys have a copy of that, because you should disseminate. It's on school consolidation. It's about the realities of school consolidation. I think the better questions, if I'm a taxpayer, is do you, school board, participate in purchasing co-ops? How do you go to bid for your natural gas? How do you go to bid for your electricity? How do you go to bid for your big school bus purchases or textbooks? And those kind of things. Are you competitive with your wages? Are you giving too much away? Like, those are the kind of things that, from my perspective, the efficiencies that I've seen. I think we're gonna see and hear more about school consolidation. I don't know that it's gonna result in actual consolidation.
But if we would merge with West Unity, they have an income tax. Do I automatically become burdened with that tax?
You do.
Without my vote? I don't get to vote on it until the next time around.
Correct.
But I become burdened with that instantly.
You
And
do.
they're a traditional, so they're gonna tax your retirement.
Well, I'm poor, so my dad probably would get it.
I think you need to stress that more, because a lot of people
Well,
don't
that's,
understand that.
I knew it, that's why I asked the question, was so you had to answer it. And it's like, you know.
You should have led me there quicker.
That's all right. I
was a little slow.
No, but
You
your
should've told me
answer
that.
was actually very,
Yeah, that was more as interesting too, because there's other reasons not to, but the fact is, they're gonna get in our pocket one way or another.
And again, you went to, do you wanna give up local control?
Right.
Yeah.
So what if we did pass it this time, and in 3 years that happened, and we have a 1% and they have a 1.5? Do you have an,
Yeah,
do you have
well,
an
my,
idea of what happened?
my understanding is it would go back to the ballot.
Because they weren't the same.
Yeah, so there would be one taxing authority, actually, I know the answer a little bit better in processing. There would be one taxing authority then, right? So a school district is a taxing authority. A library is a taxing authority, your neighboring school districts, police, fire, taxing authority. So few of us can ask for taxes. There would become one taxing authority, and the school district's board, which is the taxing authority, would say, here's what we believe is reasonable above and beyond that 1%. We're then gonna give back the 0.25, and they would contact the budget commission, and they would say, we are not going to collect the 0.25, and then at the end of the 5 years, it would be back up for a vote, and you'd put it back on at a 1% instead of 1.25. So your elected officials would evaluate that.
I think consolidate is broad too, right? Are you going to demolish both schools and build one in the middle, or are you going to now attend one school and not the other? You know, I think that's a loose term. There's a lot of details there, I would assume, that would come into play.
There would. Yeah.
Definitely not something that would happen overnight.
Yeah.
It did happen back in, what, 19...
Uncle and
merging with West Unity, where they
same taxes would apply, it'd be one taxing authority, and then you would determine, there would be an evaluation. So folks like me would come in and say, here's how much revenue you have, here's what the school needs are. If, you know, you needed to give some property tax back, you would go and say to the budget commission, county auditor, I do not need the following property mills, and you would give that back. Or on the same example with the income tax.
Would they do away with traditional, or like if one school was traditional and one wasn't?
But, I mean, I know, this is my opinion, this is not my endorsement of, for the record. I cannot advocate for a levy, but for my opinion and how we tax property versus income, there's a reason that your county and other school districts like you in Ohio have passed income taxes. It's more fair and equitable. And what I mean by more fair and equitable is not my opinion of how it treats a taxpayer. It's because you have a tax base that is a ton of property with a few houses. That's.
But I think it would be on the budget, it would be on the county to figure that out, Tracy, because it would be on the county to figure out the percentage as well as earned or traditional, whatever we would need for the whole, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then if this passes, how long until the school exceeds money? Isn't it like 18 months before they get 75%?
Yes, it's a longer runway on both property taxes and income. So it can take as long as 18 months to fully realize a 1%.
Yeah, so if it passes, it's not like expect changes overnight, like the school's not gonna see a dime for a
Well,
while.
the other hard part of that from like the school board's perspective is you have to look out 2 to 3 years and know what your finances are going to be in 2 or 3 years.
Right.
You can't wait until the last second to put a levy on. You have to put it on a little bit ahead of time, anticipating what the 5-year
So we
forecast
don't have to
is.
pay the taxes till 18 months down the line.
When would they kick in, January of 26?
No, I think it's people
If
like
it was-
you, why it takes so long, 'cause you pay it half and half, don't pay it all at once.
So it would go into effect technically January 1st of 2026, but collections wouldn't fully realize a 1% sometime in 27.
But your paycheck
Your
would
paycheck
start
would
being
start.
affected January
Yeah.
of 2026.
So we would not reach
if it
that
passed in.
$900,000 amount in collections until the second half of the 26-27 school year.
Good questions. Ask
These are
away.
great
This guy's
questions.
a very,
Well, no, these are great
glad to
questions.
have you aboard, so ask away. He's got a lot of
I can
knowledge.
talk about school funding as long as you guys want. I like that subject.
So I'm a little ignorant, and if you talk to me more than 2 minutes, you know that. So, like Mr. Rummel said up there, worst case scenario, this doesn't pass. At what point in time does, and maybe you've already discussed this, I'm a little late. At what point in time does the state come in and start running the school without, like you said, local involvement?
Right.
You wanna have some local control, you continue to fail it. There's a certain point in time where the state then gets involved.
That's right.
And then at some point in time, then would you inevitably get swallowed, they would then mandate at some point in time that you pay a certain amount? Or you get swallowed up with a consolidated, and if Montpelier's, you know, I don't know, if we're, like you said, we're 1 and they're 1.5, well, you're just gonna pay 1.5 anyways, cause now your kids are going over there. How does that, how does that work? It's just certain steps, I'm sure, that are in place.
The process from the Department of Education and Workforce is called fiscal oversight. There's 3 processes. It's like fiscal caution, watch, and emergency. It's math. So when you look at the budget that we just passed last night, and you look out 1 year, if it shows a next year deficit, not a budget deficit, but if it shows negative cash account,
Yep.
you're placed into the second highest level. And if it's during the current school year, like you're not gonna make payroll sometime within the school year, that's called fiscal emergency. The state comes in and appoints a commission The governor appoints, state of Ohio appoints, there's local elected officials that are appointed, and they supersede the board. So the superintendent makes a recommendation, the board makes an approval, and that's how it works now. The next step would be the superintendent makes a recommendation, the board makes an approval, and the commission says yes or no. Now the state-appointed commission has authority over the local control of the school district. And I work with 3 or 4 of those districts now, and the decisions are not made in what's best interest for kids and families, they're made in what's best interest of money. They have to solve for the law on the money side of the equation. So you definitely give up local control. But I also want you to hear from me that the finances, when I say reasonably stated, that's the geeky treasurer accounting term to say that the finances are well managed. The reasonably stated means there's nothing exceptional that have hit these books in the most recent past or that we predict in the future, other than it could be a bad roof, a bad boiler, unexpected bust. Those are big expenses that we have to plan for. Those are big dollar items. So that for North Central, that's out far. I think the 5th year of the forecast, we show some pretty negative deficits, but that's out quite a ways. So the planning that he's talking about to do that in advance is good, healthy, and sound fiscal management.
Also, if you could talk a little better, in order to pass a teacher's contract, the funds have to show there on the 5-year forecast. If your 5-year forecast does not support your teacher's contract, it's what null and void, right?
It is null and void. You can't, the treasurer has to sign it, and if there are funds not available, you can't sign the contract. It does not go into effect. So there's some controls in place.
So if that's like a 3-year contract, for example, the funds have to show in that 5-year forecast that for 3 years that the school can support that contract.
Right. It's actually any contract that's cumulatively more than $500,000, or I forget what percent of the budget is the threshold.
So the teachers have a little skin in the game too here, don't they?
Absolutely.
And then by law, do you have to have busing? Do you have to have sports? I mean, let's, when we talk about this, those are things that will start just going away. And, right, and then creates this chasm of kids leaving because they don't have sports, which inevitably puts your per pupil, you know, that drops your revenue, right? Does that drop your revenue? I know there's a floor there at some point, so
Right.
much per kid. So
You would,
it's
you would go to the minimum school day, the minimum, so the maximum class size ratios. 2 mile is the state max busing.
What we enacted this year.
What you did, you do not have to bus high school.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done that yet.
And you can equally start to cut athletics or co-curriculars. Equally, meaning boys, girls, has to be done equally across platforms, and you can start to reduce offerings. Many districts start in middle school, and then they move up.
And you've seen that happen probably with some of these districts that you've done there, just slowly.
Yes.
But I agree with you. I mean, not that athletics is the most important to a school, but I think if it's not there, I'm not sure how much longer your school would last.
Would your kids go to school if they didn't have athletics? I don't like it.
And I think that could be something to work for on their grades and stuff like that, because they have to keep their grades at a certain level to participate in sports. So you take the sports away. they're not
Excellent point.
there.
Yeah. And
They go hand in
you can
hand.
talk to my son. He needs a little nudge. He sure does. He's a senior this year in wrestling.
Especially in.
He doesn't get to eat anything, of course he needs a nudge.
Yeah, he needs him, he's gonna be kicking him, but.
Good questions.
Yeah.
Ask away.
Great.
next questions, we can throw a couple more in, or not really, and that you guys are seeing.
I'll leave my information for anybody that wants to reach out.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Did you
excited
hold
to
on?
have
I
you.
feel like we maybe have one.
I hear a lot of people say, well, you know, they don't wanna vote for, I'll send my kids to Montpelier, West Virginia. At what point does that stop? I mean, they can't keep taking all these children. I mean,
Like the open enrollment for the other
Yeah.
schools.
Because those people aren't paying, like,
exactly.
the people that go to Montpelier, they're not paying that 1.5 traditional.
They live in our district,
Yeah.
they go to a neighboring school district who has a higher tax, but they're almost kinda getting off the hook a little bit.
Well, you'd think that community would be a little upset about that,
Well, I think they are.
but at what point, I mean.
Probably when
they
their
can't-
community
they
goes to
can't
their
take-
board and says, stop allowing students to
So
come.
how many kids can these districts take? You know?
There's you ask a really important question, it happens all over Ohio. For whatever reason, sometimes families choose an open enrollment out, for whatever reason that is. At some point in time, that school district that takes that student gets to capacity. That's a really important equation in Ohio, because when Ohio funds their schools or funds school programs, you're only allowed to bill for the residents in your school district with a little bit of room. That's it. So you're not allowed to bill based on the potential of open enrollment coming from another district. But we still need to watch it, right? We still need to watch that, and then it doesn't make financial sense for that district that's taking the students, because they never get the local tax base. So that's not, if I was a taxpayer in that community and they were keeping extra staff employed for that, or they're keeping extra buildings, or adding additional buses, that's not fair to me as a taxpayer. So there's a pretty sizable study around the state of Ohio right now just on this subject. It's kind of along the lines of with consolidation. So, great question.
But somewhere they must be making money or they wouldn't be taking the kids. I mean, they're not just doing it. Where's the niche that they're pulling those kids?
They used to.
They used to.
So the funding model changed in 2019. And it used to give $6,000, right? So no matter what your state local share was, no matter what the split was from the state, student would enter in, that district would get $6,000. It was a moneymaker. Now,
Is that not like that at all?
it's not like that anymore. And you actually get, the local share from here follows the student. It's not $6,000, something quite a bit less than that. So do you keep teachers employed for that? The financial answer for that is, if you have open enrollment, my recommendation to a board or to a superintendent would be fill your open seats. That's a good financial decision. But at some point in time, do you hire another teacher just based on open enrollment? It doesn't make financial sense. Or do you add another route? That doesn't make financial sense. But filling open seats is a good financial decision. So I think that's where school districts are now, is filling open seats. But you also can't discriminate. So if a student comes in with special needs and that student costs $100,000 to educate, which happens, you have to take them.
No open enrollment, they would have,
What's that?
if that child lived in Pioneer and they wanted to send them to Montpelier, they have to take them.
Yes, they do.
If
There's
they
very
followed, like if they filled the
There's
paperwork out,
very-
if they did everything right.
There's
on their
very
end.
strict policies on that, but they cannot discriminate.
What does that school get, dollar line? You said $86,000, what is it?
I'll get you the exact number maybe before we leave here. I want to pull it straight from the state of Ohio and see what that number is. Ask away, let me look.
That's interesting that they have to take them, because I've heard them.
Didn't Montpelier run out of room last year or something?
What he's saying is they have to take them, they cannot discriminate, they cannot say, I'll take you, but I'm not gonna take you based on.
You have a learning
It cost me money.
So they can say no, though.
Well, there's deadlines, there's certain procedures you have to follow. So unfortunately, sometimes, and I have no no idea who you're talking about, so I'm obviously not talking about that person. But sometimes people get all fired up on things like Facebook. They didn't take us, but they don't, or they fail to say, oh yeah, the deadline was 2 weeks ago, but we really thought maybe they'd still do it. Like, so, the law literally, they cannot discriminate on it. So if they did not take that person, I can about guarantee there's a legal reason that they did not take that person.
I have heard
'Cause they don't.
instances where there's reasons why they won't take them, valid reasons. I don't know what they were.
It's about $4,800.
What's that?
It's about $4,800.
4,800.
Yes,
Per kid.
per kid.
And what do we spend per student? What's our per pupil?
Now you're asking a tough
I
question.
think it's around 98.
I thought it was-
Or it might be on one of those, it might actually be, Trevor, can I see this?
Is it yeah, so all funds.
17,000 per pupil.
10 million divided by 534 is gonna be, right, it's $10 million budget divided by 530 something.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be rough math.
Yeah.
I can tell you, we spend a lot more than that 4,800 per student. So they're getting, even their, not knowing what their numbers are, they might be getting that 4,800, but they're still spending another 12, 14,000 to educate our child from our district.
That's about 18,000. The CUP report for last year showed about like 17.
Is that on the sheet? That's what I was looking for.
Which if you check GTP, it says an average between 10 and 15, so we're a little high, but it's because our enrollment's down.
Say this again.
So with average in Ohio should be between 10 and 15,000, but it's because our enrollment's down.
Well, you gotta be
So-
careful of average in Ohio.
Well,
You do.
Yes.
I have a chart here that
Okay.
averages
Local.
county
Yeah.
and BBC schools, because I feel like BBC schools are sports league or our size.
Yep.
And the operating expenditure for NC is 17.8, and the average is 17.9.
We're right in the money with our size.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that's probably all funds. 17,000 sounds like state, local, federal, all funds.
Expenditures.
Yeah.
Income for that in our central is at 17.9, average is 19.6. So we're 2,000 shy per student on income.
Yeah. This is from the CUP report.
Yes.
That's why we're at break even.
Right.
Yeah.
But what if we calculate, if we did get the 1% income, it'd be like that 2,000?
Roughly.
It's that gap.
It's like
So,
it's
so every,
roughly, yeah.
all these, and I have a handout I'm comfortable giving. It's a spreadsheet I created, I took a bunch of stuff off of the CUP report. The income for income tax, the average income for these same school districts is $2,000 per student, on average, which is what we're shy on that, the income that I spoke about.
Nice job on it.
And what's CUP report?
What?
What's CUP report?
So that's a state, actually, you wanna add, that's a state
Yeah.
report, you can go online, CUPP, it's named after, the guy's last name was Cup, so that's why it's CUP, it's not an acronym, the guy's last name was Cup. You can go online, look up Ohio CUP report, and you can
Yeah.
run it for any, it's a very big spreadsheet, includes every district in Ohio, and there's a bunch of columns, you can look at a whole bit, square miles in the district, enrollment in the district, teacher salaries, which I have here also. It compares all different school districts.
I think the thing I learned most is 77 square miles. I had no clue about that. I mean, that's a number when you start moving
That's great.
kids every day.
If you guys are interested in this, I'll pass it out.
Oh, yeah, we might. Thanks. That's a great sheet.
I pulled it,
To our number of people.
and it's, where I pulled it from, right at the bottom.
Would you like me to turn it back on? Hey, you didn't have to stand up and talk.
Anyone else?
I know just cutting that one bus route, my daughter, she's half days, so to take her, I live on County Road 8, to take her from Pioneer to 8 is an hour drive.
Compare.
So I just
That
don't
she's
pick
on
her
the
up.
bus.
Yeah, a 5-year-old.
That she would be on the bus,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't give it out at first, and sometimes it's too much information.
It's a lot of numbers, but it's good.
Sorry if you're cold, I was really hot when we got here, and I had to stand and talk in front of people, so I turned the air on. All right, it's a little after 7, which we have no problem with staying longer if anybody has questions, but if you don't have any questions, you are more than welcome to, I'm not kicking you out, but if you're ready to go, you're welcome to go. If you have any more questions, feel free to stick around. If you have a question you don't want to ask in front of everybody, we'll be around for a little bit, come up and chat with us.
I'll leave mine.
Or Ryan. Ryan's gonna
I'll
leave
leave
some
my
business cards in case you would like the opportunity to reach out to him individually.
I will say, can I interject? Ryan is new to the district, and I am super impressed.
And
Last night was his first board meeting he attended with us. I got to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Tonight I've gotten to know him better. I am super excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Welcome.
Yeah.
It's been, yeah.
Thanks for coming out, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.